Welcome to the Bonded Podcast, hosted by Dr. Patty and Lizzie Shutt.
Welcome, everyone, to the Bonded Podcast. I am your co-host, Dr. Patty, a clinical psychologist with over 25 years of experience in healing attachment and trauma wounds.
Hello, everyone. I'm Lizzie Shutt, daughter, nature lover, healer, and mental health counselor in training.
We are so excited to introduce something that's been growing in the laboratory of life at the Sacred Treehouse, the Therapeutic Oasis, and in our Shutt Hacienda.
Let's dive in. Today's guest is Vassilia Binensztok, a licensed mental health counselor who specializes in helping adults heal from childhood trauma and anxiety. She's the founder of Juno Counseling and Wellness in Palm Beach Gardens, a thriving group practice that supports individuals, couples, teens, and very young children. Vassilia holds advanced certifications in trauma therapy, family therapy, and forensic evaluation. Her approach blends psychodynamic therapy with nervous system-based interventions, offering clients both deep insight and practical tools for healing. She's also a former adjunct professor who has taught graduate counseling courses at institutions like Northwestern University, and she has co-authored counseling textbooks and peer-reviewed articles. And when she's not doing transformative work, she's volunteering in her community, geeking out on arts, culture, random knowledge, or traveling somewhere. I'm really looking forward to sharing this interview with you all today as we all prepare for the holidays. Let's dive in. Hello, welcome back to the Bonded Podcast. Today we are interviewing Vassilia Binensztok. She is a therapist, a trauma and somatic therapist, and she's going to be sharing some timely support on navigating the holidays with, where you come across family, different traditions, we might have loss and navigating grief. So there's lots of things that can come up during this time of year, and she's going to share some insights about what she supports clients with and what we can do to support ourselves this season. But before she gives us all those good juicy details, I would love if you could just kind of share a little bit about your journey and how you got into the work that you do.
Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you, Lizzie, for having me here. Very glad to be here. And yeah, it is a really timely topic. I just had an article come out about kind of surviving Thanksgiving in Palm Beach Lifestyle magazine, which is pretty cool. Yeah, I am a psychotherapist. I have a private practice, but I focus a lot on running my practice now. I have several clinicians who work for me who have a lot of different specialties, and we work with kids as young as 2 all the way up to adults and couples. Personally, I work a lot with, as you said, trauma, particularly complex or childhood trauma, and then some of the symptoms that come out of that, which are often anxiety or relationship issues or somatic issues and things like that. It's been a long road for me in this field. I've been in this field for quite some time. I actually am a writer. I majored in English and writing as an undergrad, but I decided I wanted to pursue something that was like a little more hands-on with my career at the time. And I got into doing case management for kids that were part of the foster care system. That's just something I really care a lot about. I went through a lot when I was a child as well. And it just, human services as a field in general, helping people, helping families is something that just called to me. So I got a job doing that, and I did that for a few years actually, of just case management, mostly for kids who were abused and neglected, trying to reunite them with their families or get them adopted or get them some sort of permanent plan and make sure they had the help they needed. It's really, really hard work, and a lot of times you don't see change. You don't see a lot of positive things in that field, unfortunately. And I wanted to do something where I could actually help facilitate some change. not just kind of push papers around and send referrals, and be in this kind of environment where things are pretty dismal. So I decided to pursue a master's in counseling. And from there, it just really grew. I had a lot of different experiences. I worked in a hospital setting. I worked as a counselor at a college. And then I ended up pursuing my doctorate and teaching. So I've taught at the undergrad and graduate level in counseling and psychology. I did that for about 10 years, actually.
Okay.
And up until just a few years ago, when I really started focusing more on practice and building like this group practice, which
Mm-hmm.
is a different career almost in and of itself. It's like a kind of like
Totally.
a business. Yeah. So, focus on that. And now that's kind of what I'm doing. I see some clients and then do a lot of writing and social media work and advocacy and things like that. So that's kind of in a nutshell how I got here.
Yeah, and it's cool how it kind of feels like you're coming back to a place of where you can write again. Like I don't know if that was something that you kept up with or it's always been a constant or if you feel like now in your life again you have more space to write and
Yeah.
share. Yeah.
That's a great point. Yeah, because when you're working a lot, or when you're doing a doctorate, I mean, you just don't have the time or the mental space to be very creative.
Mm-hmm.
It's just I did so much writing for that. I've done a lot of technical writing. I've written some co-authored or co-authored some textbooks
Okay.
and chapters in textbooks and scholarly articles. So I was always writing then, but just, not really creative writing, not really the kind of thing I've always wanted to do since I was a kid. I've been writing and I used to write a lot of poetry, and the genre I've always wanted to go towards is like creative nonfiction. And so now it's like I do kind of have the space for that, but I also have the experience for that too. Like you can always write about your experiences, but I just think it's so much richer with everything that I know now and everything that I've experienced as a clinician and as an academic. So it is really nice actually to get back into more creative writing after spending so much time doing technical writing, which I can do all day long. But
Mm-hmm.
this is it's just more special to me to do this.
Just speaking to how you really started in that case manager role, and all on this podcast, and really why once I saw your Instagram, I was like, oh, I want to interview you
Yeah.
because you do work with a lot of that attachment trauma and those relationships.
Yeah.
And curious if you started off with kids and wanting to work with them, or always were more like adults, or either or were open.
Yeah, I care a lot about kids. I care a lot about kids in the system. I still volunteer in that realm. I'm the board chair for a local nonprofit called Vita Nova, and we help kids. They're 18 to 25, and most of them are aging out of foster care. So that's just always been something that's tugged at my heart. Clinically, I haven't worked a ton with kids. When you start out as a clinician, I'm sure that it's like you want to do everything, every
Yeah.
class you take. It's like, oh, I took substance abuse, I want to do substance use. I
Mm-hmm.
want to do family therapy, I want to do kids, I want to do all the things. Um, and so when I started, I kind of wanted to do everything. And then the more I worked, the more I found myself really in the trauma field, and then because it could just be so interesting, like studying anxiety, the way that it's related to trauma, or studying things like health anxiety or somatic symptom disorders, and the way that those are uh, connected to trauma and early attachments as well is just super fascinating for me.
Mm-hmm.
Very challenging work. So I didn't know I was going to end up in that. But kids it's something I care about, but in my work, I really focus more on adults that have those kinds of issues from when they were kids.
So let's dive into the holidays.
Yeah.
Many people recognize that they can become, triggered around family or as holiday decorations start to come out in stores and people are trying to advertise, buying all the shopping this time of year. So from like an attachment or trauma perspective, how do you help clients identify what's underneath those like triggering moments or those emotional reactions that they might have? And is that something that you work on with clients
Mhm.
intentionally around this time to start talking about how they might become triggered during the holidays?
Yeah, absolutely. It's such a great question. There's so many things got me thinking while you're asking that question. When I worked in an acute setting in a mental health unit in a hospital, and holidays are the times when we would get the busiest. Is so as you can imagine, it's when all those things are triggered and people are really lonely, or they feel their grief a lot more around that time, and so it's just a really hard thing to see. So many people go through, but it's interesting because sometimes people don't bring up the holidays as triggers.
Mm-hmm.
They will just kind of start describing how they've been feeling. They might have an increase in anxiety, increase in depression,
Mm-hmm.
increase in just reactivity to things. And then I will sometimes broach, like, well, do you think it's possible that on some level, even unconsciously, the fact that the holidays are coming around might be fueling that or triggering that? And that's when, if that is true for them, that they'll start to make those connections.
Mm-hmm.
It's so interesting that you mentioned when we see holiday decorations go up in stores and things like that. And like that kind of struck me, if I can share something personal.
Yeah.
When I was a kid, I had a really tough time, especially with my dad. I was kind of would say I lived in an abusive household and domestic violence. And when I would see holiday decorations go up in stores, that would make me really anxious and upset
Mm-hmm.
because the holidays were a very, very stressful time for us. A lot of kids who live in environments like that, I've come to find out it's actually a higher risk time. So summers and holidays tend to be a higher risk time for kids that are living in unstable or abusive households because they're home more, they're not out or at school, they're home
Right.
for break. Um, and their parents can be more on edge, more triggered. Maybe they're on edge financially, about
Mm-hmm.
something or about something else about the holidays. And so things can really get worse during those times where kids are not in school. And that's kind of what it was like for me. And so whenever I would see the holiday decorations go up, that would really give me like a pit of the stomach feeling. And it's funny, something I haven't thought about in a long time.
Yeah.
Now it's different, which speaks to like, yeah, you can definitely heal. I love the holidays, actually. I love
Mm-hmm.
Christmas. And I think that's a good way to heal from some of these things is say, like, how can you make it your own? You don't have to celebrate a holiday at all if you don't want to. If you want to just watch movies all day and pretend it's not Christmas or Thanksgiving, then
Mm-hmm.
there's nothing wrong with that. It's just one day and it's made to be this huge thing because it's cultural traditional in our country, but it is just one day. It doesn't have to have all that meaning if we don't assign it, and it'll pass, and the next day it won't be Thanksgiving anymore, and then everybody else will kind of go back to the way that they are, and you can kind of forget about it. So it's okay to kind of skip it, but it's okay to also make your own traditions, like do something you like. I love decorating for Christmas. I love having a Christmas tree. I love all the things that go along with this whole season just because they're pretty and fun and smell good. And so I
Mm-hmm.
just will indulge in that on purpose because I like it, not because it has to have any sort of connotation. So I don't know, I guess long answer condensed is there are so many triggers. They're all very, very personal. You never know what someone's trigger is going to be, but you can kind of overcome it by recognizing it and just figuring out what can you do to make that time good for you.
Yeah, I think that's a great, I mean, we're all about mindfulness. So becoming aware of like, okay,
Mm-hmm.
what do I notice like physically, any sensations or what's happening in my body or mentally, emotionally, what's kind of, are there any changes happening? And before just like playing it off. like really
Yeah.
actually acknowledging that.
Yeah. And it's okay. It's okay to be vulnerable and say that these things trigger you if they do. Like you said, you don't have to play it off or say, I don't care, or just bury it down. Like, it's
Mhm.
okay. A lot of people are going through this.
So, a big topic and theme in therapy and just in like the culture nowadays is nervous system regulation. And a lot of people are using that term. And in your example, for being a kid walking into that store and seeing all these, holiday lights and stuff, your nervous system kind of learned to start to prepare and protect itself. Maybe
Yeah.
it's preparing for different things. And before anything necessarily bad or harmful happens,
Hmm.
it's learned to have that preparation.
Yeah.
So for people that are, they know they have a history, maybe similar to yours, and they know the holidays are going to be triggering, what
Hmm.
are some ways that people can build their nervous system capacity, knowing they're going into a potentially emotionally charged season?
Yeah. Yeah, it's really interesting, right? Sometimes we don't know we're going to be triggered. We don't know how we're going to feel until it happens or until like we're already deep into it. And it's just like you
Mm-hmm.
said, building that mindfulness. So I really do believe that it starts with the mindful awareness of how we feel, that, there are subtle cues, or maybe sometimes not so subtle, that we're feeling hyper vigilant, like you said, or tense or kind of shut down, whatever our typical reaction might be. And a lot of times that starts small and it's not as linear as we think. It's not always about knowing, okay, this holiday's on the calendar, it's coming up in 2 weeks, and I'm ready to feel this way. A lot of times it's like, am I letting things go? Do I typically do a little bit of a self-care routine and now I feel like just not enough energy to really do it? Am I a little more short? Like, is it easier for me to get upset when I'm on the phone or when I'm driving or things like that? Am I kind of losing
Mm-hmm.
my cool a little more quickly? Do I find myself walking around with my shoulders hunched or feeling really tense or stiff a lot more than I normally would? So being mindful of like what those cues might be for you.
Mm-hmm.
And once you notice them is when you can do something with them. Probably one of the most important things to do is just self-compassion, talking to yourself in a very compassionate voice. When people fight it, when they're like, I shouldn't be feeling this way, or it's been 30 years since this
Yeah.
happened. Why am I still feeling this way? It's not going to help. It's also not
Mm-hmm.
rational. Um, we are dynamic beings, and it's wonderful to have rich emotions and experiences. And it's also okay, even when those things are uncomfortable or unexpected. So, talking to yourself in a compassionate voice and then just kind of noticing, objectively describing, what does that feel like? Okay, well, if you are losing your temper a little more easily, what does it feel like? Does it feel like a rush of energy? Do you feel hot? Does it feel like you're really activated, like you got to
Mm-hmm.
go? Do you feel like you want to clench up? Just noticing that, describing it objectively without judgment, like without saying I'm bad for having this and without saying I hate this, I can't stand it, just noticing it there and then trying to move from that to being a little more grounded. Okay, well, what else can we notice? We
Mm-hmm.
can focus on that. It diffuses the charge of it sometimes when we just objectively describe. And then we don't want to necessarily sit there forever. What else is around you? Is there something pleasant, something nice to look at? How does it feel outside? Is it pleasant? I mean, we live in Florida, it's pretty pleasant outside. Even if it's not, even if it's cold, if you go out and feel that rush of cold, what does that feel like? And bringing your attention to something else that's in the present that can kind of anchor you a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And that might help in that moment. And, we all have those good days and bad days. it might be great for a day or two, or kind of that in and of itself get you through the holidays, or you might find yourself having a day where you have to do that 5 or 6 times. And that's okay. So just kind of taking care of yourself really in that way.
Yes, I love that you shared and spoke to both mindfulness and self-compassion because that's all that we are about.
Yeah.
And those are Patty's favorite things, and that's what I've been learning and implementing in my life and in my practice. And
Yeah.
it's just so true. Like I go to the hand of the heart as
Mm.
my just self-compassionate
Yeah.
reminder and touch. But there's, yeah, just so many ways to just start to be more, turn your tone a little friendlier.
Yeah.
And if that does feel challenging, then using that observe and describe of just, okay, I'm just going to notice objectively
Mm-hmm.
what's happening here,
Mm-hmm.
and helps to, yeah, dissolve, neutralize it a bit.
Right. Yeah. And it's, yeah, if that's hard to do, like, just go a little deeper. Like, what do you think makes that hard to do? Most of the time people will say because they don't want to be weak, or
Yeah,
they think they'll foster some kind of weakness within themselves by being kind to themselves and not beating themselves up. And it's actually the opposite.
right. Yeah, we perpetuate that shame and guilt cycle if we keep being mean and hard on ourselves versus if we
Mm-hmm.
just actually accept and allow and befriend, we
Yeah.
can cut that.
Yeah. Befriend. I like that.
I know that, there's are people that they have to see their families, but their families take a lot from them, or they know it's a lot to be around them, or planning between both families. If you have a partner, you got to deal with the in-laws as well.
Yeah.
So, speaking to boundaries, is that something that you talk about with clients during this time of year, help plan with them, communicating ahead of time or communicating with their partner? Do you have any conversations around
Yeah.
boundary setting? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Right. I like that you said communicating with the partner as well.
Mhm.
Because if we are with a partner and going to some of these things, we want to make sure we're on the same page as much as possible and supporting each other. Um, yeah, it's good to know what your boundaries are before you go into a situation, just so that you can anticipate. Those things might not happen, but if they do, you don't have
Mhm.
to think on the spot and think about, what do I actually want? How do I actually feel? What do I want to answer this question?
Yeah.
You already kind of have that in your mind, so you're more prepared to deal with it. You're more prepared to respond,
Mhm.
if your boundaries are pushed or you have to set a boundary. But thinking about, yeah, what is it that usually triggers you with a family? Is it the questions they ask? Is it the way
Mhm.
that they speak? Is it the way they speak to each other? Their expectations of you, maybe even traditional like gender roles that you don't feel comfortable with, things like that.
Mhm.
And what are you okay with, and what do you have a boundary around? What does that boundary look like? And then how are you actually going to enact it? So it's okay, it's one thing to say, um, if this person starts saying this stuff, I'm not going to put up with it. Okay. Well, how are you going to do that? So I like to do a lot of rehearsal.
Uh-huh.
What does that look like? What are your options? What is option A, B, or C? Option A might be walk out of the room, but that might not be possible in a moment. If you have kids around, you don't want to make a scene or whatever it is, you don't feel comfortable, you physically can't. You can't just abandon the boundary. What's the second thing that you might be able to do that would be okay for you? Or if it is speaking up, what are the words? What does that
Mhm.
sound like? And what's comfortable for you? I might be more comfortable telling somebody, please, I don't want to talk about that, or that's not a question I feel like answering right now. But you might not be comfortable saying that, or your family might not take that well. So, what is something that you can say? Um, and then beyond that, it's also just dealing with the discomfort of it.
Mhm.
Especially if you haven't set boundaries with your family, it's going to feel uncomfortable. If they tend to make you feel guilty, then they're probably gonna make you feel guilty.
Mhm.
And just if you anticipate that, say, this is just a feeling, it's okay.
Mhm.
They haven't changed, even though I've changed. And so it's going to create this discomfort and friction. But that doesn't mean that I can't have my boundary. It doesn't mean that I can't walk away from this or something. And so, yeah, I would say the more that you can kind of anticipate things and how you're going to respond to them, the more prepared you will be for something like that.
Yeah, this is what I'm thinking would be a great invitation to listeners is to kind of go home and jot down some potential triggers and or boundaries that might relate to those things. And if you
Yeah.
have a partner or a friend that's willing to rehearse,
Yeah.
even better, or a therapist, great. Bring
Yeah.
that into session.
Absolutely. Yeah. I'm thinking about, someone in my own family who loves to ask if, when I'm going to have children. And I don't want to have children. I love children, as we talked about,
Yeah.
but I don't want to have children. And, with her, I kind of use a broken record technique from DBT. Just say, it's not something I want to do. And she'd be like, well, what about all these reasons? Well, why about this? What about your age? Well, don't you want to see a little one running around? And I'm just like, it's just not something I want to do. It's just not something I want to do. It's just not something I want to do. And then I have to deal with internally, right? Because even though I'm saying that, at first it doesn't get to me. And then, after the 10th time, I'm like, oh, like, why can't I just be respected? But, I have to realize whatever issue this person has that causes them to say something like this, like a dozen times to me, that's obviously a problem that they struggle with. And I can make this mental separation, you know?
Yeah, that is a great technique and can be challenging, but it can also be somewhat easy to have like a line like that
Hmm.
rehearsed or just
Hmm.
you keep saying it, and then give yourself that self-compassion
Yes.
afterwards. Yeah, of
Yeah.
it's hard, but I'm gonna stay true.
Yeah. Take a deep breath.
And so, moving to something that I really think is important for all people in relationships to hear is,
Hmm.
and especially when we think of trauma therapy and healing, is that all relationships are going to have rupture. It's
Hmm.
not a matter of when or it's only a matter of when it's going to happen. But what's important is that we have this repair. And that's something we speak to as, you're raising a child and you're
Yeah.
developing that attachment is it's rupture and repair. And how we can also practice that as adults.
Hmm.
And knowing that some listeners might have an emotional reaction or shut down with family, or
Hmm.
do something that they really aren't proud of afterward and wish they did something differently. If you could speak to that repair process and how we might begin that or
Yeah.
anything, around there that you want to speak to.
It's so important. And I love the point that you made about children because, it is true that ruptures in those relationships happen. And it's about the kind of rupture, but it's also about the repair. And with adults, it just can be harder, right? Because the repair takes two. So, like even in Gottman method, we talk about repair attempts that in order to actually repair, if it's our partner who's making that attempt, we have to allow it, or as they say, turn towards it, which is not always easy to do when you're emotionally charged. If you're arguing with your partner and then they say, look, let's just put this behind us and want to give you a hug, you might not be there and not want it or reject it. And then it just keeps going. So the first thing to do is to try to approach it when you're in a more calm space. And if it's the other person trying to repair, you might need to take a minute. And it's important to communicate that. Some people feel stonewalled. But when we say, I just need to take a minute to kind of get where you are with this. Like, I'm still just feeling really reactive or really emotional. Like, just give me a little time, give me a day, or give me 30 minutes or something like that. And just try to self-regulate so you can get to the place to repair. And if you're the one initiating the repair, that can be tough because the other person might not be receiving it, So I think the best thing to do sometimes is just try to put that out there, try to put out that goodwill, whether it's an apology or an offer to just talk about something. And then everyone's different. Everyone's family is different. There are a lot of families that will talk about things, and then there are a lot of families that do not talk about things,
Right.
where to repair with a family like that, it sometimes looks more like they're cleaning up in the kitchen and you just go in there and start helping and no one says anything. So it's also about like just knowing your relationships and what repair looks like in those relationships, giving yourself the space to be able to get there emotionally. And then knowing what you can control, right? You can only control your side of it. So if something's not received, let's just hope for the best. Maybe not today. Maybe at some point it will be. But all you can do is control how you say it or what you do.
So important, such an important message and reminder is that, yeah, we can only control ourselves and we have to be met halfway for
Yeah.
that relationship to repair. But also, I love the little reminder that there can be other ways than verbal to create repair. So, dishes.
Yeah.
Everybody loves help
Right.
doing the dishes or cleaning up.
Yeah. There are a lot of families like that where they're just not talkers, but like someone's hanging up the Christmas lights and you go out there and say, oh, I've got this end. And they're like, we're good now, but no one says anything. And
Yeah.
some families function well like that, and it is what it is. So it looks different for everybody.
So we've talked a lot about, like families or relationships, but some people might be feeling lonely or not have a lot of relationships, and that's what makes the holidays hard for them.
Yeah.
You spoke to at the beginning how we can kind of create our own rituals and
Yeah.
traditions. So I love that for people. But anything else that comes to mind speaking to people that don't have a lot of relationships or family, or they might be estranged and they're navigating the holidays?
Yeah, that is so challenging. There are people who maybe don't have a lot of family, but do have friends, but don't want to impose, or they feel it's an imposition. So they won't accept an invitation or they won't ask for an invitation. And if that's where you are, I think noticing that and saying, it's okay. A lot of people might love to have you around. And if they're inviting you, they're probably sincere about it, and you'd probably feel better doing that if what you want is connection. So because I see people do that a lot, where they're like, I'd rather be alone than impose on somebody because I'm not part of their family for real. And they'll build this stuff up in their head where the truth is they probably would have had a good time and the people love them and
Yeah.
it would have been okay. But then there are people who just don't have a lot of relationships. Like sometimes that just might be what it is for now, because life circumstances change so much. And that is probably the harder thing to deal with. I would say look for something you can do within the community. It might be harder on an actual holiday because things kind of close down and everybody's home. I just an aside, as I'm saying that, I'm remembering, just remember other people are in the same boat, everybody's home, you're not seeing them, and some of them are alone, or some of them are in like kind of toxic situations. So you're not totally alone in this experience. But I would say if you can try to do something, so that might look like doing a turkey trot on the morning of Thanksgiving, and you got out and you got around some people and you did a communal thing, even if you are by yourself for the rest of the day. Or it might look like volunteering. There are plenty of places for people who are unhoused or don't have food. It might be on the day of a holiday. It might be leading up. You can volunteer at a pantry to help distribute goods and items to people who just don't have it. And you get a little sense of community with other people who are volunteering there. It always feels good to help.
Yeah.
You feel like you've done something that's not all alone, which is really great. So I would look for something like that. And like you said, your own ritual. It could be a little like movie marathon, it could be decorating your home. It could be spending time with your pets. It could be trying a craft or something that you've wanted to try in that day, even if it doesn't turn out great. It could be just something like that occupies your day. And again, like I said earlier, it is one day, and it will be over, right? If you can fill up that one day and kind of get yourself through it, the next day, the holidays are done, And so try to put it into perspective like that, that you can get through it.
Yeah, this too will pass.
Yes. Yeah, right.
Yeah, but I love your suggestion on helping out in the community or turkey trot. Like getting around other people or even giving back just fills you up, fills me up when I'm giving. So,
It does. Yeah.
well, thank you so much for sharing. These are so many good tips and ideas and ways to support ourselves during this season. Is there anything else that you'd like to share about your practice or this season or anything that's on your heart?
No, that's kind of it. I mean, my practice, we do offer telehealth too. So for anyone who's in Florida, if there's anyone around who needs something like that, a little extra support, we are here. We do have some like student interns that I supervise, so I always offer them at a lower cost and much lower for like first responders, veterans.
Nice.
And so that's always an option. If you ever needed that, you can reach out to us. But other than that, not really. I just think that, knowing that keeping that in mind, like, yeah, like this too shall pass. And also whatever this year looks like for you, it might not look like this next year, it might be different next year. It's not the end of the world. You can get through it however, whatever that looks like. And then, who knows, there could be even better days ahead.
Yes, that's that mindfulness perspective. This is how it is right now, but it doesn't have to, in the next moment, in the next year, it doesn't have to look the same. And so we want to bring that, perspective with us. Wonderful. Well, thank you for your time and sharing. It was great connecting with you today.
Yeah, likewise. Thank you so much.
Thank you for tuning in to this week's episode. If it spoke to you, it'll probably speak to someone you love too. Share it with a friend and leave us a 5-star review to help spread the message it's never too late to heal.